This is a short end of day rumination. I'm not exactly sure where it's going to go. I had one topic, a brief comment, one topic in mind, with a few others always crank up in those recesses of our mind. It kind of continuously goes. There is a lot to be said, I suppose, for the idea of meditation and emptying yourself into that aum of something or other. But the end of day rumination. What I found quite irritating, quite extremely irritating, is the news cycle now has two events. It's the protests around Black Lives Matter and the COVID medical hysteria. Those are the two stories now. It used to be news was rather tedious anyway. It was kind of, at best, a boring affair. The suffering that was reported on generally, the calamities, all the multiple calamities, the suffering, all that stuff is gone. It's over. It's finished. It's just two news cycles. So that says a lot about the circumstances that we're in. There was a brief reference to a fire in a house that was started rather strangely not too far from where we are in the local news. But ultimately, all the topics, everything that is being discussed is primarily the two topics, the protests. And even in my small town of 3,000 people, there was a kind of mini protest supporting Black Lives Matter. That in itself to me is such an anomaly. Like mentally, I can't wrap my brain around this idea of Black Lives Matter. Of course, people say there's oppression and racism and all those things, but to isolate what matters and what doesn't matter into the color of skin is really quite dysfunctional. It makes no sense. But then nothing else really makes sense. And what doesn't make sense at all is that there are just two news items worthy of reporting these days for the last couple of weeks now. These two items, it was just one item before, now it's two items. Okay, I'm sure I don't need to, I didn't need to really say this. People understand and know this, but I imagine that the ordinary person isn't even reflecting on how completely myopic reporting is. Never mind what is being reported, it's just the fact that the topic is just reduced now to two issues that is of any significance or value. Life is of really no significance, anything other than these topics. Anyway, then I had a few other thoughts on a YouTuber that I was listening to and trying to make sense of it, trying to make sense, giving honest efforts. There are really good people out there trying to make sense of what it is that we're facing and why things are the way, why the world is the way it is. And that's a valid question always. It's why is the world the way it is? And I want to explain it, and I have ideas and theories. And as we escalate into this level of a deeper loss of self, this is what I referred to in one of my last videos. The distancing from oneself is really what's happening. It's the self-distancing from oneself is beginning to take hold in people. And as this progresses, and there are YouTubers that I'll mention this again, the quantum of conscience guy, and someone he referred to as Vannessa. He had a link to Vannessa, and she was talking about the reality which is completely constructed, and we're fitting into this reality when we don't reflect, when we have no critical thought left, when we have distanced ourselves enough from ourselves. We rely on Big Brother to give us all the answers and ideas that we have. There are no original ideas. This has been something that's been quite distressing from an artistic point of view, that what is being promoted as original or fabulous art really isn't from it may be it may be accomplished work, but there is no originality in the work. And the originality that really is missing is the work has no conscience or heart. Like you can have spectacle and create upset in something that you make as a as a creative person, whether it's film, photography, any kind of visual art, writing. You can create a sense of feeling, but not the feeling. If it isn't there, the work generally for me does not hold this 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 intensity. That's something that I associate also with originality. And originality isn't really required in even great works of art. It's not that important always, but it does add something that is now completely, I think it's completely missing. So I'm just sort of, I'm going to keep this short. I'm thinking about uh, these particular YouTubers talking about the circumstance we find ourselves in, and why are we now reduced to two news cycle stories basically, and all the rest of the associated dysfunction that is all around us. And what I really like about the Matt fellow from Quantum of Conscience is that he has superbly analyzed when things that are not what they appear to be, and understood to some extent what they may actually be. So if we're looking at an event and we dissect the reality of the event and look at it, whether it's moon landing or the 9/11 or the shootings that happened, what part of it is real, what part of it feels constructed and unreal. He goes into, and other people as well, not just him. But I'm referring to him because there's a curious thing that's happened in my mind. This is something that's actually quite disturbing. And the more I've commented on this as well on this channel, I've tried to point this out. And the more we are aware that the world is not what it appears to be, and then we attempt to create a context, something. What is the intent? Why is it the way it is? What is behind it? And of course, the usual suspects always arise. There is a litany of usual suspects from the Crowleys in the esoteric side to and even on the good side like Krishnamurti, and then you have the Rockefellers, the business types. You have people that are functioning in the shadows to orchestrate and manipulate something which makes the world appear a certain way, but because of the intent, it is not what it appears to be. Now, these people, many of whom, Crow 777 guy as well, or Veritas Radio, there's a lot of people doing excellent analysis. But I'm going to just mention something that disturbed me, and what it was. There is a desperation around the helplessness I feel, the overwhelmed feeling, that people feel overwhelmed by the circumstances that we find ourselves in personally and collectively. And then the theories begin to evolve. It's like the idea that we are now going through a period where this medical hysteria and tyranny is going to drive us into a very narrow path where we need to comply in order to exist. Compliance and existence will go hand in hand in some form or other down the road. As this dysfunction unfolds more and more, and I believe it will, I think there is a good indication that the fall and next year, as we proceed through these ongoing crises, these two, the police action and the protests and the virus stuff, it's going to become much more difficult to um, to assert an individuality, which is part of, I would agree that this is part of the plan, to eliminate individuality and have um, a collective kind of speak thought going on, kind of like the 1984 You just have the big screen, and something comes towards you. This face tells you what to think and what to feel and when to piss and shit and whatever. It's like all laid out. And this is going to become much more prevalent. We're already seeing it in stores. You have to walk, there's an arrow, and you have to walk where the arrow goes. And you know, in the old days, 80, 90 years ago, they put little stars on people's clothes so those people can't walk anywhere. And this is going to have its own version again. We're going to see this own version. Maybe it'll be a digital ID that everybody will get. It's, you know, before it was the Jews who had to have the star, and now it'll be a digital ID tag that everybody will be wearing. So the individuality side of things is diminished more and more. Now, there is a theory from the YouTubers that I mentioned that the reason this is happening is because there's a portion of the population that is not in some form or other of us. The theory is, this Vannessa YouTuber said, it's of a lesser soul kind of individual who have no empathy, sympathy, none of the feelings that make us who we are in the sense of our aspirations, that whatever the virtue, whatever you identify as being a virtue, and this is generally speaking not associated with the material world, it's something of a more of a spiritual nature that we have to us, meaning the qualities in us that are not really, you can't pinpoint something. It's almost like trying to understand, I mentioned in my last video, why certain colors react with each other to create an emotion or effect in your mind. These are things that happen on a level, on a subliminal level, even on a part within us that is not identifiable in a kind of nut and bolt way. So this, I'll keep it short. I'll end it here. This was very disturbing to me, because the idea of creating a lesser soul amongst us. Now, this is easily adaptable in our mind, because when we look at the depravities, the things that people do to each other, even when you look at films, how films exploit the idea of this callous, the nuances of callousness that can be escalated into levels of complete and abject barbarity. What I consider to be, it's like somebody abusing. The abuses, the level of abuse is so extreme that one capitulates into a kind of shell and says, this is not human. These are people that are not of us. And then we create a kind of second tier group of people. It's like the Nazis had, well, they had a second group, and you could fit into different categories within those groups. You could be like the Indians with their untouchables. It's another version of that. That's quite despicable. The entire philosophy around souls being not of a rank that you should associate with. So if you're, I don't have much understanding of this Indian religious belief of souls not measuring up, being untouchable. But what happens mentally if we become comfortable with that idea, that as we see another human being, but have in the back of our minds the idea that they're of a lesser stature because of their behavior. And it's not, like I said, it's not difficult to associate an esoteric tag that makes the soul of another person less than your own. And this is very much the same as what the Nazis attempted to do when they peripheralized groups and created a tier system, a hierarchy. And this is not, I mean, I'm not talking about something that has never been attempted to be expressed or explored to its fullest, like the Crowley idea, this degenerate, who actually used people. It's a using of people. This happens all the time. But what kind of a soul does this person have that is different from my soul? Well, it's a lesser soul. It's a soul that is actually struggling, as you might give credit and say, well, this soul is going through these awful behaviors because over time, like a reincarnation, you got to come back and do it again, and all this kind of hooey in order to express, understand an intent. Why things are the way they are. And all I want to alert today, what I wanted to say was that it is a very slippery slope. It's a thin ice that one skates on when we resort to theories that lessen the quality of the person that we're seeing. Almost sort of like the idea of an alien type, to create a subculture of aliens that have nothing to do with us, and we stand apart from them. There was a video that I saw about the black box guy who has suggested that the AI is literally an alien entity among us that doesn't care. It's neither evil nor good. It doesn't care about us. And you know that you don't have to look to aliens to exemplify that. Then people acting without any kind of uh, moral compass and conscience. This is everywhere. We don't need to ascribe otherworldly beings or any other kind of thing. This is part of what we are attempting to extricate from ourselves every day on different levels. This is not something that some people, I would say some people are more adept at having arrived at a profound understanding of the true virtue of our nature. This is obvious in people that I've had experience with, that I feel like that warm and fuzzy feeling when I'm around them, because they exemplify and act within this framework of virtue, of being virtuous, truly virtuous in their actions, in their thinking, in their being. And then there are other people that just are totally repulsive and revolting, but they're still people. It's not of a lesser kind of person. It's just something that has happened for whatever reason that makes a person just a better person. They're better people. Some people are shitheads and some people are just better people. And to develop an elaborate system of why this is becomes very I would say it's a dangerous step to take. And I said so much to this Vannessa girl that to separate ourselves from each other, which is what is the intent behind everything that's going on, is playing into exactly what's going on just generally anyway. Now, this is longer than I was going to talk about, and about the news cycles, but it's very important. This is my last thought. It's very important to maintain a sense of self, even when things are breaking apart around us. And it's difficult for me as well, because if I go through, let's say recently I had an illness, it was difficult to maintain a sense of self within that feeling of despair that something is breaking down physically. I was experiencing relatively severe hardships, and lots of people go through that, and different people have thresholds that are incredibly capable of dealing with those extreme circumstances much better than I would. But this is, I think it's part of my learning to, when I'm exposed to certain difficult challenges, to see how I come out as a person. Do I shut down? Do I go into a shell and become absolutely obnoxious to the rest of the world? Or am I still capable of relating? Do I still maintain a sense of openness, a sense of self that doesn't recoil into its shell, like a turtle into a shell? This is very important. And I think the Matt fellow has recoiled tremendously, same as the person he recommended to look at, this Vannessa YouTuber. I forget her name. I'm not going to bother with links. I'm just using them as an example to be truly aware of how easy it is to capitulate to this overwhelmed feeling and just abdicate that sense of self. by creating the hierarchies. Like these souls, they're saying these souls are in where are they in the next life, in eternity somehow. There is there is a separation and a distinction between the type of soul that exists. Well, it's a bunch of hooey. It makes no sense in terms of my own understanding and my own growth. That absolutely makes no sense. So don't bother. Don't go there. Don't go there. We're given a plate that we have to chew on. With stuff on our plate, we really got to chew this one out. And it looks bleak in many ways, but at the same time, for myself, I feel quite enlightened about understanding certain things about myself, considering the adversities that we face. And we certainly are facing some tremendous challenges right now. So I think I'm going to do a follow-up video, because the thought of like this idea about souls being, of a higher and lower kind of value brings up the topic of eternity. And I'm going to touch on this again, because I have a romance with eternity. I'm going to elaborate what that means. Anyway, that'll be for the next video. So 2 news cycles: Black Lives Matter and COVID tyranny. Those are the 2 tyrannies now in the news cycle. There's nothing else. There's nothing else. So I thought I thought I would chime in on another news cycle for you, and that is the differentiation of souls and how some are more equal than others.